When you look at the official story for what's next in Gaza, there's a clear plan on paper. But when you look at the reality on the ground, what you see is a crisis that's only getting deeper. Today, we're going to dig into that massive gap between the two. Let's get right into it. So this slide really tells the whole story in a nutshell. On one side, you've got the plan, a brand new government, a clear path to recovery, an open border with the world. And on the other side, well, you've got the reality. That new government's leadership is stuck in a hotel. The crisis is getting worse by the day, and that open border is more like a bottleneck. Let's break down how we even got here, starting with that official plan. All right, so first up, let's talk about the blueprint, the one that was presented to the world. On paper, it actually looks pretty straightforward, a clear path to rebuilding Gaza. This whole blueprint really rests on four key pillars. First, you get a new government made up of Palestinian experts, technocrats, not politicians, called the NCAG to take over from Hamas. Second, a very high-profile, kind of glossy reconstruction plan gets unveiled. Third, there's a big precondition. Israel has to get all of its hostages back. And finally, the all-important Rafah crossing with Egypt has to be reopened. So who exactly is this new government, this NCAG? Well, it's a committee of appointed experts. The idea was to bring in people who could handle the day-to-day running of Gaza and manage its recovery, steering clear of the politics. They're basically the designated replacement for Hamas's rule. And the vision they sold to the world? Wow, it was incredibly optimistic. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, this slick map was presented. It showed a future Gaza with a beautiful, sparkling new waterfront, a total transformation. But that's the plan. Now, let's flip over to the reality on the ground. And that reality, well, it could not be more different. For the people who are actually living in Gaza right now, those promises from Davos must feel like they're from another planet. Just to give you a sense of the scale of the humanitarian need we're talking about, it is staggering. Over 1 million people are still displaced. They're living in the ruins of their old homes or in tents with almost no basic services. And even with a ceasefire in place, the crisis just rolls on. Since it started, around 500 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. Simple things we take for granted, like tomatoes, are now considered a luxury. Almost no one has electricity. And on top of all that, really severe respiratory infections are spreading like wildfire. And some of the key aid agencies have actually been ordered to pack up and leave. The Rafah crossing is the perfect example of this gap between what was promised and what's actually happening. It was supposed to reopen, but just look at these numbers from its first day. You've got about 20,000 people who need to get out for urgent medical care, but only 5 patients were allowed through. 50 people were registered to come back home to Gaza, and only 12 made it. And for that tiny handful of people who did get through, the journey was an absolute ordeal. People who were there said the process took over 15 hours. It involved interrogations by 3 different groups, blindfolds, handcuffs. This is not the open border anyone was promised. So this all leads to the big question, right? Why? Why is the plan failing so spectacularly? And the answer, really, comes down to a complete and total political paralysis. Let's go back to that new government, the NCAG. It's basically a government in name only. Its members are literally just waiting in a hotel in Cairo because they haven't been allowed to enter Gaza. They have no money, not even a bank account. They couldn't even keep their own official logo because Israel objected. They are completely and utterly powerless. The money for rebuilding isn't getting through either. You have the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank insisting that any and all funds have to go through its president, Mahmoud Abbas. At the same time, the United Arab Emirates, which everyone thought would be a key donor, is now publicly saying they have no plans to pay for reconstruction, so the money is blocked from all sides. And from Israel's perspective, it all comes down to one single point. They've made it very clear that nothing meaningful, no reconstruction, no open borders, no new government, can happen until Hamas is fully disarmed. For them, that is the non-negotiable starting line. But here's the other side of it. Hamas is now backtracking on its promise to disarm. And why? Well, they're looking over at the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. The PA has been cooperating with Israel on security for years. And yet, they're on the verge of financial collapse because Israel has been withholding their revenues. So from where Hamas is sitting, there's just no guarantee that giving up their weapons will actually lead to a better situation.
So what you get from all of this is a really dangerous feedback loop. The political gridlock and the humanitarian crisis on the ground, they don't just exist next to each other. They actively feed off each other. And it creates this vicious cycle that keeps everything stuck.
So here's how that cycle works. It starts with the political standoff, right? Israel demands disarmament, Hamas hesitates. That tension eventually leads to an incident on the ground, maybe an attack. That's followed by a military retaliation, which causes more casualties and makes conditions even worse. And that, in turn, just makes both sides dig in their heels even more, reinforcing the original standoff. The cycle just keeps repeating. And this isn't just some theory. We saw this exact cycle play out in real time not long ago. On February 2nd, the Rafah crossing opened, a tiny glimmer of progress. The very next day, a gunman wounded an Israeli officer. And the aftermath? Israel launched airstrikes that killed 20 people and immediately shut the crossing down again. Just like that, everyone was snapped right back to square one.
So those glossy plans from Davos, they feel a million miles away. The reality is this self-perpetuating cycle of violence and stagnation. And it leaves us with a really, really tough question. With the plan stalled and the politics completely paralyzed, what force on earth could possibly be strong enough to break Gaza's vicious cycle?